Each year during the Goodreads Choice Awards, they announce the top 20 best mystery thrillers of the year, and I always have this dream of reading them all and being able to tell you about all of them and feeling like I have a true opinion of which is the best out of the full list. But I have never fully completed the list until this year, and I am so excited about it. By the time I'm talking to you, I have completed all of the books in the top 20, but I'm going to be taking you through my experience getting through all of them. When the top 20 came out, I had already read 11 out of the top 20, so I had 9 more to go, and there were a couple of them that were already on my radar, a couple of them that were not, one of them that I hadn't even heard of at all. And I decided that 9 books was feasible enough, and the books were interesting enough for me to actually read all of them, and I indeed did it. I read all 20. So in today's video, I'm going to talk to you about the 11 that I already read and how I rated those, and then we're going to move into a reading vlog portion where you'll see my experience reading the remaining 9. And then at the very end, we'll talk about all 20. We'll talk about my ratings for all of them, how I would stack rank them, which ones I would recommend, which ones I would not recommend, and which one I think is actually the best out of the entire list. So first we're going to start by talking about the 11 books that I already read by the time the top 20 came out. 11 out of the top 20 is usually around the point that I'm at because I do read so many mystery thrillers throughout the year. These are the 11 that I already read when the awards were announced, and these are how I rated all of them. We have quite the broad range, very broad spectrum of ratings here, and I'm going to be telling you about each of these books, what they're about, and why I rated them the way I did, and if I would recommend them to you or not. First up is The Teacher by Freida McFadden. This is one of 2 Freida McFadden books which made it on the top 20, and this is definitely the worst one. That's a little bit of a spoiler to The Boyfriend, which I'll talk about in the reading vlog, but yeah, The Teacher is definitely worse. I ended up giving this book a 1 star because it was just so terrible. It's a story about this woman who is a teacher, and there's this student at her high school named Addie, and Addie has this reputation at school because she had this whole incident last year where she ended up accusing a teacher of something, and the whole story is about Eve, the teacher's relationship with this student Addie, and some other stuff that's going on. Freida McFadden's synopses usually don't give too much away, so I don't want to give too much away about the plot of the book, but just know it was not good. The whole book gave me an icky feeling. It was also just so dumb. It was pretty dumb, and it was written very, very poorly. And I'm not just a Freida McFadden hater. I've really enjoyed some of Freida McFadden's books, but this one is by far the worst thing I've read from her. I can't believe it was as popular as it was. And I fear it's going to win this entire category because it seems to be the most popular book, but I really, really hope it doesn't because this book truly is not worth your time. Next is Middle of the Night by Riley Sager. I also gave this book a 1 star. And again, I've loved some books from Riley Sager in the past, but this one I did not. This is a story about this man named Ethan. And when he was a child, he used to camp in his backyard with his friend Billy. But one night he woke up and Billy was gone. And that has haunted him his entire life, wondering what happened to Billy. Now it is multiple decades later. He is a full-blown adult and he is moving back into his parents' house, which is where that tragedy happened. And he starts to wonder if he is being haunted by his friend's ghost. And he's starting to want to really piece together what happened to his friend all those years ago. I found this book to be so frustrating. There were some things that just felt so silly in it, and it was such a slow burn, such a slog to get through. And so much of the story hinges on something that I hate in mystery thrillers, which is amnesia. Ethan was there when it happened, but he can't remember what happened, and this is one of those books that hinges on, at the end, having this miraculous recovery of memory, which frustrates me so much in a mystery thriller. I just like for reveals to be more complex than that, and I did not have a good time with this one. Home is Where the Bodies Are. I ended up giving a 2 star. This is a story about these 3 siblings whose mother dies, and after that they end up coming back together and going through her things. They find this home video that reveals their father with a dead body, and that leads them to investigating to see what happened and who their parents really were. I felt like the story just fell really flat to me. It was just exactly what the synopsis said it was, and it really didn't do anything for me. I found this one to be very unmemorable, and it felt like more of a drama between the siblings than anything else, and it just wasn't for me. First Lie Wins was a very popular thriller that came out this year that is about this con woman who always is working these jobs under a false identity, and then one day she is confronted with someone who is assuming her real identity, and that just turns her world upside down. I thought this one sounded really interesting and people were really loving it, so I had high hopes going into it, but it ended up not really working for me. I found the writing to be a bit confusing, the way the story is portrayed through a lot of flashbacks and different identities, and it was difficult for me to really follow along. At least difficult to be engaged in that writing style as it was going on. But I did like the ending and how it pulled everything together and the complexities with explaining what was going on, so I ended up giving it right in the middle a 2.5, but it definitely did not live up to the hype for me. Another book that didn't live up to the hype for me this year was The God of the Woods. This is a literary mystery that follows the story of a missing child at a summer camp. And this isn't the first time a child's gone missing at the summer camp, because the older brother of the child who's missing now also went missing 14 years ago. So you're unfolding both mysteries, what happened to the current missing child and what happened to her brother many years ago. I did think the writing of this one was very good and atmospheric. It does have a nice writing style to it, but I found the mystery to just really drag on. It also involves a lot of characters and different POVs, and that felt like it was dragging the story out. And all in all, it just didn't really satisfy me, so I ended up also giving this one a 2.5. Listen for the Lie follows a woman named Lucy who's from a small town in Texas, and she is not well liked in this town because when she was younger, her best friend was murdered and she was covered in the blood, and everyone kind of thinks she did it, but she always says that she hasn't done it, but also she doesn't really remember what happened. Now there is a successful true crime podcast that is going to be telling this story again. Lucy has returned home and it is going to be diving back into the story to find out what actually happened. As I said before with Middle of the Night, I don't like amnesia mystery thrillers where it's all just hinging on recovering the memory. But this book had some other things going for it. It had a podcast element, and I'm usually not the biggest fan of podcast thrillers, but I actually really enjoyed the podcast element of the story and how that part is actually what was moving the story along. This book just in general wasn't exactly what I was expecting. It was a lot quirkier than I thought it would be, and it kind of read like a cozy mystery at times. So I think if my expectations were set differently going into it, maybe I would have had a better experience. But all in all, I thought it was fine. I gave it a 3-star, and a lot of people seem to really be loving this one this year. The Heiress, interestingly, reminded me of The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, because this is a story about this really wealthy woman in North Carolina who is a widower many times over. She has had several husbands throughout her life, and all the deaths of her husbands are a little bit suspicious. The story mainly follows the one who is going to inherit all of her wealth, which is her adopted son and his wife, although he's not interested in the wealth, but his wife is. This was less of a mystery with this like active storyline through it where characters really trying to investigate something that happened, and more of a mystery where it's just unraveling to you, the reader, as you are going through the present day and some flashbacks to piece together everything that has gone on in this family. I actually found it to be really engaging and well written, even though it's not my favorite tropes, and I ended up giving it a 3-star because I thought it was a pretty good time. The Midnight Feast follows the story of what happens on the opening weekend of this new resort that's out in the woods. The story begins and you know that someone died, but you don't know who and you don't know why. I'm a general fan of Lucy Foley's stories, and I had a good enough time with this one. It wasn't amazing, but it wasn't terrible or disappointing, and I also really liked the woodsy atmosphere with some witchy vibes to it as well, so I ended up giving it a 3-star. When you're going into a Sally Hepworth story, you have to know what you're getting yourself into. She writes more slow burn family dramas. That's a very specific niche of the mystery thriller category, and you're either gonna like it or you won't. And I always really enjoy Sally Hepworth's stories. I just like the way she brings her characters to life and the themes that she explores in her stories. And this one was a story about sisterhood and resilience. Darling Girls follows the story of 3 women who were brought together when they were young girls by their foster mom. In the present day, there are bones found under the house of their foster mom, and it's starting to bring to life some of the truth of the situation they were in growing up with an abusive foster mom. This was more of a slow burn story, but it did have some twists, and I always love a Sally Hepworth story. The Return of Ellie Black follows a detective whose own sister went missing 20 years ago. Because of that, she is extra passionate about finding missing girls. And one day, a teenager who went missing 2 years ago, Ellie Black, returns. The detective is really eager to work with her to see if she can help find some other missing girls, but Ellie is not talking. The story ends up unraveling from there, and I really enjoyed this one. I thought the writing was really good. I even marked out some quotes from this one, which I don't always do with my books. I didn't absolutely love it because stories about kidnapping are not my favorite thing to read about, but all things considered, I had a really great time with it, and I ended up giving it a 4-star. And finally, my favorite out of what I had read so far is How to Solve Your Own Murder, which I ended up giving a 4.5-star rating. This is the start of a cozy mystery series, and in this story, there was this woman named Frances who her whole life she was convinced that someone was going to murder her because of this fortune teller and what she said to her when she was a teenager. So her whole life she is on the lookout for her murderer. She's gathering all these clues. She had this riddle told to her that she's been trying to unravel, and then one day she does die, and it does look like it is a murder. And her great niece is coming back to the small little village where her great aunt Frances lived and trying to uncover, was it a murder and who was the killer? I had a really fun time with this. I love a cozy mystery nowadays, and I really just liked the quirky vibe to this and the village feel. The only thing that didn't make it a full 5-star rating for me is I did not find the main character Annie to be overly memorable. There wasn't anything about her that really stood out as a main character. The great aunt Frances really stood out, and I think she would have been a really interesting character to get even more of in the story, but of course it starts with her dying, so that didn't really happen. But I had a really good time with it, and I will be continuing in the series. So that is an overview of the 11 books that I had read by the time that the Goodreads Choice Awards were announced. And now I'm going to be taking you back in time so you can see my experience reading the remaining 9, starting with The Night We Lost Him by Laura Dave. Okay, so I am 24% into The Night We Lost Him, so gonna give you a little first impression of the story. I did read that other big popular book from this author when it came out. I also listened to it on audio. I'm listening to this on audio, and I think I gave that book like a 3.5 when I read it, whatever it was called. I remember I was listening to it while I was on a really long drive, and I'm pretty sure I listened to it all in that one drive. And I feel like this book is also going to be a pretty quick listen because I couldn't believe I was already 24% of the way into it, and I had to pause myself because I was like, oh my gosh, like, we gotta give a first impression before we get too far. I will say I had little to no interest in reading this book. This is not a book that I would have picked up probably on my own, but because I have enjoyed a book from the author before and because I have it on audio specifically through the Libro FM ALC program, so I just got it for free, I'm like, might as well listen. I'm sure it'll be a quick listen, and I have liked something before, so maybe this will surprise me. The synopsis just doesn't seem that interesting to me. The concept of this is that your main character is this woman named Nora, and her father dies at the beginning of the book. He lived out on the West Coast, she lived in New York, and he had this really nice house out on the beach, and it starts with his death. He falls and dies. But then after his death, her half-brother Sam calls her and is convinced that it was not an accident and that someone might have killed their father and that their father was acting weird before his death, and so he wants them to go fly out to the West Coast together and investigate. So that's what they do, and as they're doing that, they learn things about their father that they didn't know. Their father was a man who was married 3 times, and he never truly divorced, which is an interesting kind of concept. I actually feel like I know people like this who just get married a couple times but still stay in touch with their exes, or don't even end up divorcing that last time, and then they end up still married to someone that they're actually just fully separated from. And so I suspect this is going to be a story about family, more of like a family drama than anything else. So far, I am enjoying the reading experience because Julia Whelan, I never know how to say her name, Julia Whelan, you know her. If you've ever listened to an audiobook, you've heard a Julia audiobook, I'm sure, and she is the best narrator. So I love that she's the narrator, and I feel like it's really atmospheric, setting up the vibes of the story. This is highly specific, but listening to this story feels very similar to watching an Apple TV show, which might be because the other book from this author was adapted into an Apple TV show, and I did end up watching the Apple TV show, but there's just something so specific about the atmosphere of an Apple TV show. I don't really know how to describe it, but it just feels a little bit different from like a Netflix show or a Hulu show. It's just like the color grading, the way it's shot, it always just feels a little bit different in a way that's really difficult to explain. But that's kind of how the story's feeling to me so far, at least, with the atmosphere building of the New York setting and what this woman's life is like. And she's got a fiance, but she's also got an ex who's kind of still in her life, and just all these little family pieces and then getting on the phone and getting on a plane and going out to the West Coast and the atmospheric description of the West Coast. So I'm not having a bad time with it. I'm just really not super intrigued by the story. So hopefully it pulls me in more. I am 58% of the way through The Night We Lost Him, so a little over halfway. I'm wildly uninterested in this book. I am going to continue and just finish it because I have it on audio and it's like less than 2 hours left and it's been a really easy listen, but it's so boring to me. Nothing has happened. It's just this woman and her half-brother going and trying to collect these clues and understand who their father was, but it's just so boring and surface level. It's not the concept, it's how boring and surface level it is, because I was thinking back to Miracle Creek by Angie Kim. That's one of my favorite books. It's more of like a literary mystery, and the whole concept of that is also uncovering these things about the father of this family and learning, you know, his secrets and things. And that's such a complex and such a rich and engaging book. This one is just so boring. They're just like talking to some people, questioning some things, being like, oh, why was he talking about selling his business? That doesn't seem like him. Why did he call this person on the day that he died? That seems a little strange. Was he in contact with this person? What was going on? And just not a lot's happening to really drive the story forward or make it feel full and rich. And I'm just not loving it. But like I said, I'm gonna finish it, so I'll see how the ending goes. Begrudgingly, I finished The Night We Lost Him. I did not like this book. I thought it was very, very boring. I did not find anything about it interesting or compelling, and it just felt like it dragged on and on and on. And yeah, I definitely would have DNF'd this had I been reading it physically, but the audio was just short and easy. To be fair to this book, I was never interested in it in the first place. I knew it was probably something I wouldn't enjoy, that I didn't really want to pick up. I just picked it up for this video, and I did not like it. And I'm giving it a 1 star because I just couldn't find anything redeeming in it. I really couldn't. It just was just a story of exactly what it said it was, of these siblings learning about their dad's past, and that's it. There was nothing exciting about it. I just don't think it's the type of story for me. I just didn't get it. I did not enjoy it. My intuition was correct. I knew I wasn't gonna like it, and I did not. I started We Solve Murders last night and I'm 65 pages in, so just a quick little first impression here on how this one is going. I am greatly enjoying it. I really like Richard Osman's writing style, and I kind of wish I had this one on audio because I really do like to listen to his books on audio, but I already purchased the physical copy and it's a hardcover, and I just feel the need to do it justice and read it physically because I did purchase it. I'm enjoying the experience reading it physically as well. I just think it might be a little bit heightened for me and even better if I was listening on audio, but I'm having a good time. The setup of this one is you're following these two main characters, Steve and Amy. Steve is this older man who is a retired cop. He is now living a more simple, slow life in a village where he started his own investigation firm, but he's just solving small crimes like money getting stolen from a till or a lost dog in the community. And he has a daughter-in-law, Amy, who is living a much more high-profile life. She is a bodyguard to really endangered people, like famous people, people whose lives are at risk, and she travels the world all around to protect people, and they have a really close relationship, which is really sweet to follow. They call each other every day and just talk about their days and what's going on, and Amy ends up being put at the center of this mystery that's going on where all these people around her keep ending up dead, and it looks like she might be the next target. So I guess in some way her and Steve are going to work together. That hasn't quite happened yet. It's been mostly the setup of the story, but I really like the characters. I like the tone, the writing style, the mystery that's being set forward. The biggest thing that has given me a reason to rate Richard Osman's books a little bit lower recently in the past from the Thursday Murder Club series is because I love those characters. It's a story about some older adults who live in a community together and they solve crimes together. I love the characters. I love their dynamic together. They're often solving mysteries that require a lot of external information, external characters, external exposition. Like, it's kind of like a distant thing that they're solving. It's not so much immediately impacting them all of the time. And it's also usually stuff to do with like money and drugs and jewelry for some reason. I feel like this mystery is going to be sort of similar, but it doesn't feel as distant. It feels like maybe it's going to be closer to the characters, and maybe I'm going to enjoy that a little bit more. So all in all, having a really good time, really pulled into this story, and I'm going to keep reading, and I'll give you a midway update when I get there. Midway update, I'm at 196 pages into We Solve Murders, and I'm loving it. I'm loving it. It's going great. I don't have that much to say. I think the story in general is moving like a little bit slow, but it's moving, like things are happening. It's just kind of like them going around trying to figure things out in different places, trying to evade a murderer, trying to solve what has been going on, and I just like it. I love the characters, really like the setup. I feel like this would be a really good summer read because there is like some warmer locations and some traveling around, and it just feels like it'd be really fun to read by the pool. Also because it is kind of like a lighter, cozier mystery, you know, like it's something you want to read in the sunshine. So I guess it's not the best book for this time of year, but I do live in Florida, so it is still pretty warm here and sunny, so it's working out for me. I am enjoying the mystery of this one more than I enjoy the mysteries in the Thursday Murder Club, so that's really good. It's because it is so focused on these main characters, which is what I like. I feel like there's maybe some things that are kind of obvious, but I'm not going to know that until the end, until I hear how everything's explained. But I feel like there's some things where I'm like, oh, is this what's happening? Like, it seems like maybe this is what's going on. I could be wrong, I could be surprised, but even if I'm trailing the mystery, I'm okay with that because I'm really liking these characters and I just love Richard Osman's writing style, and just being in his books is just a feel-good time. So I'm gonna go on to finish the book and then I'll let you know my final thoughts. I finished We Solve Murders and I'm happy to report that I'm giving this a 5-star. I had a really good time with this. It's my first 5-star, but I've given a Richard Osman book, so that is exciting. I do really enjoy the Thursday Murder Club series, but none of them have gotten a 5-star quite yet. I still have the 4th one to read, which I know is an emotional one, so that one might tip me over. But this was just such a delight. I loved these characters so much. I got so invested in just following them, going all around the world, and just their dynamics with one another. It was truly just such a great time bringing this cast of sort of unlikely characters together who were just all so charismatic and like you cannot help but fall in love with them. The one thing I was worried about with this story was the nature of the mystery, because Richard Osman does write these types of mysteries that typically involve a group of characters following these mysteries that have to do with things like diamonds, money smuggling, crime lords, guns, like just really large things that usually read pretty gritty. If you're reading a mystery with those things, it's usually like a pretty gritty detective kind of mystery. But because he contrasts it with this really light, heartwarming tone because of the characters and how funny they all are and how they're just so human and like regular people, it ends up pulling me into the story, even though those aren't my favorite types of mysteries. I think if Richard Osman was to write a like locked room, closed circle murder mystery, it would potentially be my favorite book of all time, because it would pull in like my favorite types of mysteries with this writing style and these characters that I love so much. And I don't know if another book would ever be able to live up to it. So Richard, if you're listening, let's get that on the radar. But yeah, I loved it. It was great. It was a complex mystery that had me guessing the whole time. I didn't know where exactly it was going to go. And I kind of thought about maybe giving it a 4.5 because it wasn't my favorite type of mystery, but I'm like, no, it's a 5-star. I was fully consumed in this book the whole time. I didn't want to look away from it. I just wanted to keep reading it, and I feel like I'm gonna remember it for a long time, and it's the start of a series, so I will definitely be continuing whenever the next one comes out. I have started The Boyfriend by Frida McFadden as my next book. I'm 16% of the way through this and I'm listening to it on audio because it's available through Everand, and I cannot spend any more money on Frida McFadden books because I know what I'm getting myself into here and it's probably not going to be good. I had a good relationship with her books in the very beginning. I enjoyed the first couple I read, and then they just keep getting worse and worse and worse for me. So I have pretty much decided to stop reading Frida McFadden books, but if they pop up in something like this, where it's a reading challenge, I'm trying to read as many of these books as I can, they're in this awards, she's gonna be in the award because she's popular, I'll do it. I'll just read it. I have not looked into this book at all this year. I saw it came out and I just had no interest in looking at it at all. I did look at the synopsis just now while I started listening to the book because I wanted to understand how much of this is supposed to be setting up expectations for something, or am I supposed to be surprised by something that's going on? Because right now we're following two different characters. You have Sydney, who is a woman who has been going on dates through this dating app, and it starts with her going on this date with this guy, Kevin, who turns out to look nothing like his picture, and then she just has a horrible experience with him, and then he tries to like walk her home and make a pass at her and then gets angry when she rejects him. And then this mystery man kind of helps save her out of that awkward situation. And she thinks the mystery man is very attractive and like can't stop thinking about him, but they part ways and she just keeps thinking about him. I assume they're gonna end up getting together because the synopsis says that Sydney ends up dating this handsome, successful doctor and everything seems really good. But then there's also these serial murders that are happening where this guy like dates women and then kills them. I guess you're supposed to expect that it's him. The other perspective we get in the book is this guy named Tom, and it's always marked as before, so I guess you're going back in time with Tom. I assume Tom's gonna be the boyfriend. I think that's the setup. And Tom is a creep. He has been like in love with this girl since she was 4 years old, and all he thinks about is killing her, basically. So that's a disaster. And we're going back and forth in the timelines between these two characters. It seems pretty straightforward and boring. It's always easier for me to listen to an audiobook that I'm finding boring because, you know, I can do something else. I'm not just stuck looking at the book. I can color, or I can stretch, or I can walk on a walk. Like there's other things that I can do instead of just feeling like I'm held prisoner into the book. So audio is a nice choice. I don't think I've ever done a Freida McFadden book on audiobook before. So that's also kind of an interesting test. Like maybe I'll enjoy it a little bit more being an audiobook. I don't know. I don't have high hopes for this one, but that's my first impression. I'm halfway through The Boyfriend now, and I feel like I'm missing something. I'm just really curious about this whole experience, and this is probably because this is one of the Freida McFadden books I heard the least about at this point. I haven't heard really anyone talk about it, so I just thought it'd be like any other kind of Freida book where it's trying to be pretty twisty, but I'm like, is this twisty or is it just like a suspense book? Because it feels so straightforward. Like I said from the beginning, you're alternating these character perspectives, so you're getting Tom in the before times and you're getting Sydney in the present times. And the whole concept is that there's this mystery killer going around. So I'm like, it's Tom, right? In the present day. And the story's just going on. And I'm like, am I supposed to be expecting a twist? Am I supposed to be expecting a surprise? Because it just seems so straightforward. And 50% of the way through, I'm just waiting to feel surprised, I guess. Maybe that's not the point of this one. Maybe it's not that kind of book. Maybe it is just more of a suspense book, but it's like watching a horror movie and you're screaming at the character like, don't go in that room, get away from that creepy guy, which is just not what I typically expect from a Freida McFadden book. I will say, I do feel like the audio experience, or maybe even just in general, like this book does not feel as badly written as The Teacher did. And I don't know if that's because it's truly not as poorly written or because I'm listening on audio, so I'm not examining the writing as much maybe. But I do think it is just written better. I think it's that one because The Teacher was just horrible. It was horrible to read. The woman kept talking about high heel shoes clicking on the floor. It was just like juvenile writing, whereas this one just feels like average, standard, regular schmegular story. So it's going fine. I don't like it, but I don't hate it. And if I'm 50% in and not hating it, that's a relief. I'm gonna say something kind of crazy, but I just finished The Boyfriend and I didn't hate it. I didn't hate it. The plot twist got me. Didn't see that coming, so there was a twist. And I don't know, I guess something about the audiobook experience did make it just feel like more easy breezy. And then I was like, whoa, when the plot twist came. And I just wasn't over examining it too much. And I didn't feel like I was miserable in the writing like I have been feeling with Freida books. And honestly, not bad. I mean, if I sit here and I think about it and I dissect it and I go through the things that happened and I, you know, think about things on a more critical level, I'd give it a 2. But honestly, for the experience I had, I'm giving it a 3. So that's not too bad. That's kind of nice. I feel like I'm back. That's how I used to feel reading Freida books in the very beginning. And I don't know if this one is better or if my expectations were just so very low that the only place we had to go was up, or if the audiobook really made my experience that much better. And I'm thinking it might be a combination of the 3. But if I ever read a Freida McFadden book again, I think I'm gonna go the audiobook route because that wasn't too bad. If you haven't read a Freida McFadden book before, they're just popcorn thrillers. They are not overly complex. They are certainly not the most sophisticated writing style. I think they're almost always in first person, kind of read like a diary style. And you just can't think about them too hard. You just can't. But yeah, I think I got through it in like 2 sittings. Very quick, very easy breezy. Kind of ridiculous, but I like a ridiculous book, so that works for me. And all in all, it really fits into my bucket of what a 3-star thriller is for me, where I'm like, yeah, it was fine. It was a good time. It had a twist that surprised me. I wasn't miserable reading it. It wasn't life-changing. I wouldn't really go out of my way to super recommend it, but if you're interested in it, I actually didn't think it was that bad. About 150 pages into Society of Lies, so I'm approaching the midway point on this one, giving you my first update. I remember hearing about this book when it was first coming out and it was mildly on my radar, but I didn't end up picking it up because it didn't sound like something that I would be overly interested in. It does have more of a dark academia feel to it, and I've never really loved a dark academia book. That's just never been my preferred type of story. And halfway through this book, I am finding that to be exactly true. So any rating I give this book is going to be, disclaimer on the fact that this just isn't my favorite type of story. This is more of a mystery, kind of a literary mystery thriller. It has a little bit of all the different vibes that you'll typically see in the Goodreads Choice Awards. The story is following two sisters. You have Maya, who's the older sister by 10 years, and Naomi, who's the younger sister. And the story begins with Naomi dying. Naomi is in college at the same place Maya was, Princeton, and they are both involved in the same secret society. And the story is told in multiple point of views at different points in time. So you're seeing present day with Maya as she's grieving the loss of her sister Naomi and trying to figure out what happened because it's said to be an accident, but she doesn't think it was accidental because of the past that she has. So you're also following Maya in the past when she was in college, getting involved in the secret society, and she went through a sort of similar experience and is connecting some dots here. And then you're also following Naomi's point of view about 7 months before her death, leading up to the time of her death. I think it's well written and I think it's fine so far. It's just not my preferred type of story. I don't find these stories to be overly interesting to me unless there's something else going on or some kind of complexity added to the story. I don't feel overly invested in these characters because, I don't know, I just don't feel like it's doing a lot of character building. It's really mainly just focused on this dark academia vibe and the secret societies and what's going on in the secret societies, which is what I usually find in a dark academia book and then why I don't always find them the most interesting to me. The main characters in the story, Maya and Naomi, are half Chinese, half Black, so there is a lot of discussion in this book about discrimination and also class and privilege, especially because in the present day timeline, it's set in 2022, and so there's a lot of talks about the implications of COVID and how that caused a lot of increased racial stereotyping and discrimination towards people of Asian descent. Also to note, it is a Reese Witherspoon book club pick, and it does feel like a Reese Witherspoon book club pick, the type of mystery thrillers that typically end up making it on her selections, where it's stories about women and resilience and discrimination and race and class and privilege. Like it has something to say and unpack, which would make for a good book club discussion. So all in all, it's a good book. It's well written. It's good, but it's just not overly interesting to me in particular. So I don't expect that I'm going to rate this higher than 3 stars, but I'm not having a terrible time with it. My boyfriend was sitting in my chair yesterday and he reconfigured it. So now it leans really far back and then I get kind of stuck. So if at any point I disappear, I'll come back. But I am here to tell you about the ending of Society of Lies because I did finish this book. As expected, I'm going to be giving it a 3-star rating. I thought it was fine. I actually didn't mind reading it. Sometimes, or usually I guess, if it's a book that I'm not overly interested in, it feels kind of like a slog, especially for a project like this, just getting through a book for the sake of getting through it. But I did like the writing style of this one, and it was compelling enough that it kept my attention, and I didn't really mind reading it. The main thing is, it's just not my type of mystery thriller that I gravitate towards. This is not something that I would typically want to pick up. It's not something that ends up making it to the top of my list for my favorite mystery thrillers. But as a book, it was good. It was fine. Gave it a 3-star. I think the pacing was kind of strange because it was such a slowly paced book, and then right at the end things speed up a lot really dramatically, and it was really taking me off guard with the ending of just how things were moving. I was very surprised by some things that happened, not in terms of, being shocked by the twist, but being surprised that the story decided to take the direction that it was right at the end with a specific thing that happens and how it explains everything in the end. It just felt kind of strange compared to the rest of the book. It wasn't bad, it was just different for some reason. But all in all, the writing was pretty good. This is definitely a book that focuses on writing quality more than just your typical like popcorn thriller. This is a well-written book. Could have done more with the character depth, I feel, because you are following both sisters, and I can't remember if I said this earlier, but you're following both sisters and they live really similar lives in different points in time, and so it was kind of confusing going between their perspectives for a bit at the beginning until I got a grasp of who they were, because they also talk about the same characters at different points in time, you know, across their two different timelines. So it was a little bit difficult to distinguish that in the very beginning. But yeah, if you're someone who likes dark academia stories that typically follow the themes that dark academia stories do, then I'm sure you'll appreciate it. It just wasn't necessarily something that I would really enjoy. I've started House of Glass by Sarah Pekkanen. I'm not sure exactly how far into it I am because I'm listening to the audiobook on Everand, formerly known as Scribd, and it doesn't do the best at tracking percentages, but I'm on chapter 13 of 69, and it looks to be like 15%-ish into the story. This story is following your main character named Stella, who I think is a lawyer. I actually haven't really gotten the fullest grasp of what she is. Maybe she's a psychologist. She's either a child psychologist or a lawyer or some kind of mix of those things. She is working with this girl who is recently going through some trauma. Her name is Rose. She is 7 to 9 years old, and she is currently not speaking after this incident that happened at her house. So her family seems to be very wealthy. They live in this nice house. They are known as the Barclays. And recently, Rose's nanny, Tina, just died, and Rose witnessed this, I believe. She fell through a window off a balcony and died, I think. I haven't gotten all the details yet. I mean, I've gotten them, but I haven't pieced them all together yet. And I guess the nanny was also pregnant with the husband's baby. So there was also an affair situation going on. So now the parents are separating and they're fighting over custody of the daughter. And our main character, Stella, is working with the daughter, Rose. So Stella's getting to know this family and kind of piecing together what happened, but there's this question of, was Tina's death an accident or was it a murder? I have read from Sarah Pekkanen before. I read one of her books or two of her books with Greer Hendricks. I don't remember ever really loving any of their stories, but I've had okay experiences with them. And this is another one of the books that's on the list that I probably would not have picked up for any reason other than this project. It just didn't sound that interesting to me. I'm not that interested in just like domestic thrillers anymore unless it's specifically very popcorny, like a palate cleanser type of story, and this just feels like commercial thriller to me, which is so far the experience that I'm having. So we'll see how this one goes, but I'm not feeling overly hopeful. I am 58% of the way through House of Glass, and this is going to be a quicker update because I really do not have very much to say about this book. So far, the whole story has just been the synopsis where this woman, Stella, is getting to know this girl, Rose, and interviewing all these people in the family and around the family to understand the dynamics of the family while trying to make an assessment on which parent would be the best custodian for the child, but also trying to get a sense of what happened to the nanny who died. And from the beginning, it has been sort of set up as, well, I guess the synopsis doesn't really tell you. So I guess I won't fully spoil it, but like she has one kind of clear suspect who's looking like they might be at the root of everything, and it's just been building that the whole time. And now suddenly, right around the 50% mark, the main character Stella is also like, maybe I should investigate what happened to my mom because my mom also died. And I'm like, that's kind of weird to introduce that now at this point in the story. So I don't know, I'm not loving it. It's just kind of boring to me because it's just been her talking to all these people being like, what do you think of this family? What do you think? What do you think? How do you feel like this child has been acting? Like, what do you feel like? And I'm just not finding it overly compelling, which I didn't expect that I would. So it's going just how I thought it would, which is not that interesting to me. I like a thriller with more of a gimmick to it nowadays, something that is more unique and like, a game element or a locked room element, a countdown timer of something, a gimmick in the way the narrative is told through multiple POVs at different times and like hiding information from you in that way, mixed media, those sorts of things. A very straightforward story of a woman just getting to know this family is not doing it for me, but I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna finish it and I will let you know my final thoughts. I finished House of Glass and I found it to be very not good. I'm giving this one a 1 star. I didn't like it and it felt like the whole book just dragged and dragged and dragged and kind of amounted to nothing. I feel like looking back at the whole book, it just feels like a waste of my time a little bit. I just really didn't like it and I've never been the biggest fan of this author's works with Greer Hendricks. This was one I wasn't going to pick up anyway. I just picked it up for the video. I knew I probably wasn't going to like it and then I didn't like it. I can't really even think of anything to compare it to. It was just really boring to me and what I call a nothing burger. Like it just didn't do anything for me. It was just a nothing burger. I didn't find it surprising. I didn't find the characters interesting. I just really don't have that much more to say about it because I was just so underwhelmed. I don't think I'm going to be reading from this author again unless, you know, I end up doing it again for a video like this in the future. But if it's up to me, I don't really think I'll be picking up books from her again. I am 60 pages into Not What It Seems by Yasmin and Go. And so far, I'm not sure how I'm going to end up feeling about this book. Could go either way. It could end up pulling me in more, or it could end up being a very slow burn, boring situation. The first 60 pages haven't definitively grabbed me one way or the other. The setup of this story is you're following this woman named Jack, and she grew up in this small town in South Carolina, but she has since moved away. The reason she moved away is because her dad died, and she became ostracized in the town because everyone was convinced that she killed her own dad because she was the only one with the dad when he died. So then she went away and moved away, but now she's coming back to the small town because now her granddad is in the hospital, and so she's coming back to be with family. When she comes back, she is noticing some weird things in the town. There is a lady named Faye Arden who is a wealthy newcomer, and she has taken over this manor in the town and turned it into a quaint country inn. And Jack is suspicious of her and what's going on there, and then she ends up finding some connection with her grandfather and this lady. Her grandfather also was an armchair detective, like he would be on forums trying to solve crimes, and I guess she liked to do that with him, and they had a special connection where they engaged in stuff like that. So she's gonna be detectiving a little bit. But so far, we're really just starting in the setup of the story. She's just gotten back to the town and she just ran into this lady for the first time. Jack is also a black woman, and so she deals with a lot of racism, and race is clearly gonna be an important part of the story as well, with this new wealthy white lady who's in town as well. So far just kind of laying the foundation. It is a book that is more descriptive in its writing style, and it feels a little more dense, I guess, than I expected it to. Like it just kind of feels like sometimes there's a lot of description and like bulk to it, and not as much dialogue. So in the beginning, I felt like it was taking me a minute to pull me into the first couple of chapters because it would be these long walls of description and internal thoughts. And for me, I like to see dialogue and get to know my characters by the way that they're like talking and revealing things and like showing me things versus just telling me what's happening. So it took me a minute to get into the flow of that, but I'm getting more absorbed in it now. Nothing too definitive to say beyond that. I will check in with you again at the midway point and we'll see how it's going. Okay, midway update. I am reading outside and it's very cold. So I am under my blanket and the book's just gonna be on the screen. I am not liking this. I do not like it. It is so slow. I am 235 pages in, and when I tell you nothing's happening, this is such a boring book, and I don't like the way it's written. It feels like it's just so overwritten. Like every single detail of someone's movement is described rather than just moving on to the next scene at times. And I'm not having a good time. I just completed Not What She Seems, and this was a journey. I was really hoping to at least like this book because this was the only book out of the 20 nominees that I had never heard of before, and this is a book by a Black author, and the mystery thriller category does not usually have a lot of diversity in it. It definitely does not this year either. I think this is the only book by a Black author on the entire mystery thriller category, and so I would have just loved to have a good time with it, but I did not. But I did have a better time since the midway update. This book has a pacing problem. That's the biggest issue with it, is 275 pages is the synopsis, like the teaser of the synopsis, and then finally stuff happens at the end, and it's like 370 pages. So you get 270 pages of slow, like over exposition, just like stuck in this woman's head, just thinking the same things over and over. She's curious about this woman in town, but she's not doing anything. She's not investigating anything. She's not following any leads. She's doing absolutely nothing. And then the last 100 pages, everything happens. She suddenly is like, oh, maybe I should research that thing that I saw written in my granddad's house and like look into this case that he was looking into and maybe follow some leads. And then finally it gets exciting. And then there's like action sequences and there's surprising reveals and there's emotional human connection stuff. I feel like that last 100 pages would have been like a 3.5 star read, but everything to get there was like a 1-star read. So I think I'm gonna settle on giving this book a 2. I am at least glad that the ending picked up a bit because I was not having a good time for a long time, and at least, you know, it did pick up. So this author has potential. This book just has a pacing problem. And the publisher for this is Thomas and Mercer, which I don't know exactly what that publisher is, if this was self-published. I did see a lot of people saying that this was one of the Amazon first read selections sometime throughout the year, which is how they think it ended up getting in the Goodreads Choice Awards at all. And I don't know if those are usually like self-published books. I don't know, but with some editing, this could have been a lot better, which is unfortunate, but that's how it ended up shaking out. I am 30% of the way through The Mystery Guest, and I did read The Maid before. I did read The Maid when it came out. It has been a while. I remembered some things about it, but I needed a refresher. So I did look up some spoilers and got fully refreshed on everything that happened in The Maid to prepare for The Mystery Guest. Back when I read The Maid, I didn't love it. I gave it a 2 or a 3 star, but I also was not loving cozier stories at that time or funnier stories, and now I'm loving cozier stories, these types of mysteries. Stories with some more humor and lightness to them, but also some like emotional human things to them. I'm just liking that a lot more. So I think I'm set up to enjoy The Mystery Guest better than I enjoyed The Maid. They are following chronological order. So this is set 3 years after the events of The Maid, and it does fully give you a recap of what happens in The Maid within the beginning of this book. So you're not going to want to pick this up if you do end up wanting to read The Maid. But if you haven't read The Maid, I think you could read this, but there's like some character building stuff that happens in the first book. So I would recommend reading them in order probably versus just reading this one, but I will not spoil The Maid for you as I talk about The Mystery Guest. I'll just talk about that independently because the concept of The Maid is that you're following this maid who works at this hotel and she ends up finding a dead body, and then she ends up looking like the main suspect, and so she's trying to clear her name and make sure she doesn't get arrested for this death. But also Molly, the maid, is very, I don't know if it was ever said, I know this was a big discussion when the book came out, but Molly, the character, very much reads as a neurodivergent or autistic character just based on how her character is portrayed. And so there's a lot of almost like humor or irony that comes into the story because she does not understand social conventions as much, and just like the way she communicates is very straightforward, and it just makes her this kind of like, I don't want to say quirky character because I don't know, but you know, it's just like it has more of a light feel to it because of that. She's just always finding herself in some shenanigans because of it, basically. And so that tone is carried into this story, and this story is set 3 years or so after the events of the first book, but the mystery is independent in this one pretty much, so I can talk about it without spoiling the book. But again, I think you should read The Maid first. In this one, similarly, Molly, still a maid, she's training another maid at the hotel, and they're having this mystery author come, and he's supposed to be giving this big announcement, and while he's giving the announcement, he drops dead. And again, Molly is kind of looking like she's really at the center of the crime because the maid that she has been training is the one who served him the tea, and the detective who's on the case was the same detective from the first book who already had some suspicions of Molly and is like frustrated from dealing with her. So now that's all happening. And you're also getting flashbacks in this story from Molly's childhood because that starts to bring together some pieces, some important connections to what's going on in the present day. I'm already liking it better than I enjoyed The Maid so far, just 30% into the story. I like these stories a lot more than I used to. So I feel like it's gonna be a better time than it was for me in the past. Just a nice fun mystery. I love a mystery. I needed a break from all of these domestic thrillers. So very delighted to be reading a mystery again. And yeah, it's a good time. I'm also listening to it on Spotify. This is the first time I've ever listened to an audiobook on Spotify because I do have a Spotify membership and I know you get like 15 hours a month or something from audiobook credits, but I always forget that there are audiobooks on Spotify. And this one, I was gonna listen on Everand, but the thing just happened where I'm not actually gonna be able to listen to it on Everand until like mid-December. So I thought, let me check Spotify. I've never used that before, and it was available there. And so far, I have no complaints about the experience of using Spotify either. Although I'm sure it will be frustrating when you get down to your hours, especially if you're in the middle of a book in a month. Oh my God, that would be horrible. But yeah, so far, so good. I finished The Mystery Guest last night, and this was a really easy breezy read. I think I'm gonna give this a 3-star. I don't have a lot of feelings about this book. I don't feel like I would have picked this up if it weren't for the awards. I just wasn't overly excited about continuing with the series. And after reading The Mystery Guest, I also feel like I'm good to stop here. Like I don't need more books in this series, but it's definitely setting itself up to continue. And I think if you love this series, you would be excited about that. I just don't love this series. I just like it and I think it's okay. If we get to this point next year and she's got another one out and it makes it into Goodreads Choice Awards again and I do a video like this again, I will unbegrudgingly read it. Like I'll be fine to read another one, but I just don't want to go out of my way to pick up a book and continue in this series. It's just not my most favorite series, but yeah, it was a fine, cozy murder mystery, continuing to follow Molly at the hotel, some new shenanigans, some new connection points. Most of this book is dependent on a lot of flashbacks of Molly's childhood and her remembering things from her childhood that help her piece together what's going on in the present. That's usually not my favorite style of book, but because this is just like an easy breezy audiobook murder mystery, I didn't care as much. I typically like it when in a mystery, the main character is more actively following clues and talking to people and like doing things in the present versus just trying to miraculously remember all these things that piece together the context for the mystery, but it was fine. I don't have a lot of complaints. I didn't really love anything about it. I didn't really hate anything about it. I just thought it was an okay time. I'm 33% of the way into the last one at the wedding, and this book has sort of been on my radar. I wasn't totally sure if I was going to pick it up, but this is forcing me to, so now I'll see what it's like. I was initially interested in picking it up, but I've heard reviews on it that have made me not as excited for it. I feel like a lot of what I'm hearing is that the ending of this one isn't very good, which was also the situation with Hidden Pictures, where Hidden Pictures was entertaining, but the ending was not very good. The concept of this story is that you're following this guy named Frank who has an adult daughter named Maggie, and they've been estranged for the past 3 years, but all of a sudden Frank gets a call from Maggie and she is inviting him to her wedding. She is marrying this guy named Aiden who she just started dating like 6 months ago, and it turns out that he's from the super rich family that has a lot of like mystery and intrigue around them. So this is what brings Frank and his daughter back together. So he's like, you know what, this is kind of crazy, but I really just want to form a relationship with my daughter again, so I'm just going to support her and go through this journey with her. And now he is at the wedding. I don't remember exactly what the synopsis says the take is going to happen. I think it's just generally like he starts to pick up on weird vibes from this guy and he's getting worried about it, but it's this tension between like he doesn't want to harm his relationship with his daughter, but he also wants to protect his daughter is mainly what is happening. And he started to pick up on some things from the guy and he's like hearing some things and there's been some suspicious stuff come up. So the guy definitely looks like he has some weirdness around him. And then of course, because this is a super successful and rich family, like they've got to sign this 56-page NDA when they're arriving to the wedding, and they're supposed to set their watches back 15 minutes because they run on gardener time around there, which is just their own made up little thing. So just some weirdness, just some initial vibes, only 33% in, so just getting the setup so far. My initial take is this is a pretty enjoyable audiobook listen. It is very easy to consume. I'm liking it on audio. And so far it's just like kind of a setup of a sinister situation, and I'm not sure where it's gonna go. I'm expecting a kind of bonkers ending based on what I've heard about it. We'll see how I feel about that. So far, everything's fine. I'm 58% of the way through The Last One at the Wedding now, and I've just been listening to this all in one go. I've been listening to the audiobook for the past couple of hours. I feel like this is the most wildly obvious book ever. I feel like I know exactly what's going on, and yikes. Maybe I'm a mastermind because I've been reading so many thrillers back to back to back to back, and now I just can recognize it. Kind of similar to one of the twists in one of the other books in the video, if it is going in that direction. Yeah, I feel like I've just cracked the case. I feel like I know what's going on. I hope I haven't. I hope it's more complicated than this, but I'm pretty sure I know what's going on. And I just remembered too, I was trying to remember, I was like, wait, why do people not like the ending of this book? And I've heard people say it takes like a weird approach on cops, specifically in the ending. And the first book Jason Reculette came out with was Hidden Pictures, and the ending of that one was very contentious for people, specifically related to transphobia. And there was back and forth of like, is the book problematic or is it not? And then it leads you to kind of question the author in some ways too, like what is the author's own beliefs? And in this one, now I'm remembering that there's gonna be like some weird stuff like the agenda of cops, which I don't know what that's going to be yet. But remembering all of that, I am hearing some things in the book, and then I'm like, what is this author's stance on things? Because I just don't know if you're writing characters in a certain way, or if you maybe have some, you know, questionable perspectives on things. I don't know. That's very vague, but it's just like little nuanced, little tiny little moments where I'm like, I wonder. So that I have my ears pricked up for. I hope I'm not right. I hope I haven't figured out everything. I hope it surprises me. Enjoyment wise, I mean, it's just like mid. It's so fine because I'm like, wait, is this really all it's going to be? So the end's really gonna make or break it. I just finished The Last One at the Wedding, and I'm gonna tell you about it as quickly as I can because my camera battery is dying and I don't feel like getting up and changing it. This ending sucked. This ending was bad, and it wasn't because it did something crazy. It was just that it was a bad ending. It takes a really weird ramp down where it just takes so long to end things, and you're just waiting and waiting and waiting, and then all of a sudden it's the end of the book and you're just like, that's it? That's how we're ending the book? It was not a good ending. Concept: dad goes to a strange daughter's wedding. Whole time, I felt like I knew what the vibe was. He thought the guy was bad. The dad, not a fun character to follow. He's just questioning this whole wedding. And then something finally happens. And then it just trails on into the ending for about, I don't know. It was an hour in the audiobook. I don't know how many pages that was. 75 pages or so. Really long. Drawn out ending that ends with a very strange last chapter where you're just like, I'm sorry, what was the point of that last chapter? And what kind of message are we sending here? What is going on? I don't know. It left you feeling very much like, huh? Did I miss something? That was strange. So I'm giving this book a 2-star overall because I thought the concept could have been interesting and the writing could have been interesting, but it just amounted to what felt like nothing to me, and it ended up feeling really disappointing. So that was a bummer. I don't feel like this author is gonna be one I look out for new books from after reading 2 books from him and having these kind of strange experiences with them. He's just not gonna be super high up on my radar, and I definitely don't think it was one of the best mystery thrillers of the year. That's for sure. I have made it to my last book of the video, and I saved the most intimidating for last because this is a huge book. It is almost 600 pages long. It's a long one, and I have been so worried about this one. I have really been feeling like if there was a book out of this entire TBR that I was going to DNF, it would be this one, because also this is what I knew about it was a more literary mystery. But I'm pleased to say I am 144 pages in, and I'm actually really liking it, which I did not see coming. The description of this book, I feel like, doesn't necessarily give it all away, and so many things have already happened that I am very curious what the scope of the story is going to be for it to be 600 pages long. If we've already done so much in 144 pages, I feel like this might be like a decades long spanning type of story. I'm not really sure. But what I know so far from what it is about is you have two main-ish characters. They are younger children. They're around 13 years old when the story's beginning in 1975. You have a girl named Saint and a boy who goes by Patch. His name is Joseph, but he goes by Patch because he was born with only one eye, so he wears an eye patch and he calls himself a pirate and he is known as Patch. Patch is the son of a single mother who is really destitute. She does not have much money. They're not living in great conditions. And Saint is being raised by her grandmother. They are better off, but still, you know, lower middle class, maybe even lower than that. And the story begins when Patch decides to help save this really wealthy girl who's being attacked in town. And as a result of that, something bad happens to him. And then Saint makes it her mission to figure out what happened. That's kind of where the story's gone so far. But like I said, so much has happened in 144 pages that I don't know what the scope or the span of the novel is going to be. The synopsis leaves it a little bit vague too. It ends up saying, Patch and those who love him soon discover that the line between triumph and tragedy has never been finer, and that their search for answers will lead them to truths that could mean losing one another. A missing person mystery, a serial killer thriller, a love story, a unique twist on each. All the Colors of the Dark is about what lurks in the shadows of obsession and the blinding light of hope. So yeah, it is a mystery to me as to what we're going to do for the next couple of hundred of pages, but I really like what I'm reading so far. I really feel like these characters are very much being brought to life, and just the love that Saint has for her friend and the passion that she has is very enthralling. It's very captivating, and it all starts with this missing person story, which is a good mystery angle to hook me into a more literary type of book that I'm not usually drawn to, so I'm having a really good time with it so far. In the very, very beginning, like the first 25 pages, the writing style was clashing with me a little bit, and I actually ended up going back and reading those first 25 pages again once I got about 50 pages into the story, because the way it's written is a little flowery in the very beginning and I wasn't exactly piecing what was going on together the best. But once I got fully in the story and then I reread it, I was fine. So if you do start this book and the beginning's a little bit abrasive to you, maybe just try to give it to like 50 pages, because I felt like that's when I really started to get pulled into the story. Anyways, I guess I could keep reading it and my mind could change and then I wouldn't recommend it at all, but I don't think that's gonna happen because I am having a pretty good time so far. So I'm gonna keep reading and I'll check in with you in another 100 pages or so. I'm 300 pages into all the things, all the Colors of the Dark. So I'm about halfway through the book now and I'm still really liking it. I feel like this is kind of a strange book to put in the mystery thriller category. It is very literary fiction and just really a character study. You're really just following characters throughout this book as they go on through their life after this tragic event happens and then how it shapes them. And I think the synopsis said it was a book about obsession, and I think that's the best way to describe it. Like, it's about something traumatic happening to you and then the way you can obsess over that and how that filters into the rest of your life and the choices that you make. It's darker in tone because of the tragic event of what happens in the beginning, but it just feels like literary fiction to me, but I'm really liking it. We'll see once I do finish the back half of the book if like anything changes to make me change my opinion on that. But as of now, getting 300 pages into it, it feels like something that should have just been in the literary fiction category. It could even be historical fiction because it's set in the 70s and the 80s. We inevitably always end up with a book or two like this in the mystery thriller category that is like this. That just always happens. I knew it would happen this year. I thought we'd have more than we ended up having, actually. But anyways, I'm having a good time with it, still enjoying it. Really like these characters, really like following their trajectories and just seeing how their lives are shaking out and the connections that they have with one another and the things that they're obsessing over and how that is like tragically making their life unfold. Yeah, in a tragic way. It just feels like you're watching this tragedy unfold the whole time. We're seeing how these people's lives could have been so much different, but this is the path that it's going because of what happened to them. I don't read books like this very often. There's usually just a couple that come up every year that I do end up picking up because of something like this, or it becomes popular, and so I do decide to venture out and read it. And when I do dive into a book that very much is just a character-driven story where you're building these really complex characters who feel so real, I do get so drawn into them and I love them so much. All that to say, this comparison I'm about to make may seem odd, but it's because I don't read many books like this, and this is the closest thing that it's reminding me of to this book. But it's reminding me of Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin, which I ended up picking up, I think, last year because of the Goodreads Choice Awards. Maybe that was 2 years ago. And that is also a very character-driven book about these two people who are kind of in and out of each other's lives throughout the years, and there's some tragic elements to it as well. That's very much how this feels because of what happens between Saint and Patch and then seeing what unfolds from there. It's not thrilling, it's not really mysterious or suspenseful, it's just tragic and like a drama that is unfolding before you, and I'm so consumed in it. I can't believe I've already read 300 pages. The book's just flying by. It really does not feel as long as it is. The chapters are all very, very short. Some of them are just a page, some of them are 2 pages. The longest chapter was probably like, I don't know, 5 pages or something. They're very short chapters that keep you really engaged in the story because it's moving through time so much. So I'm enjoying that. All in all, having a good time with it. I'm gonna finish it up and then I'll let you know my final thoughts. I just finished All the Colors of the Dark and I am weepy. This one made me cry right at the end several times. There's just something about a book like this where you're following characters through decades where you just get so in their lives with them. It's just so cathartic. Oh, wow. This was really good. I'm giving it 5 stars. It really took me by surprise. I did not expect to encounter the reveal that we did and to be so surprised by it, and just like the depth around the explanations of things that were happening and how everything connects, and then you're looking back at the past couple of decades so differently. And oh wow, yeah, I really like this. This is definitely a more slow burn literary story, but very driven by the mystery that is causing this obsession in these characters that's driving every decision that they make. So I'm actually fine with it being in the mystery thriller category because that feels like the best place for it to be, I guess. I would also say one of the biggest themes of this story is like what is right and what is wrong, and that justice isn't always so clear, and that making the call of what is right and what is wrong is not always so clear, which is a very common theme in mysteries. I like this so much. This is gonna be staying with me for a while. This was really good. It was really long. This was a super long book. It didn't feel that long, but looking back, it does seem like something that could have been shorter, but I don't know. I really liked it. This and The God of the Woods are the 2 literary books that I saw getting hyped up so much throughout the year, and I picked up The God of the Woods first a long time ago, and I ended up being disappointed by that. It didn't have what I was looking for, and so then it made me kind of write this book off, and I put this book off for last because it was so long, and I thought, I don't think I'm gonna like it, and what if I end up DNFing it? The literary mystery thrillers this year just aren't what I'm looking for. But I'm so glad I ended up picking this up because it was so good. So good. I'm pretty sure I've seen that this is being adapted for TV, and I think it'll be a really good TV show. And I just can't get over how surprised I was with the explanation. I just did not think this book was surprising me. I thought it would just be straightforward and kind of go in one direction. And then at the end, there were so many moments like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, wait, and that thing, and this thing, and that thing, and fully just bringing the full picture together. That was so satisfying after going through 500, 600 pages of build to then get all of that in the ending. It was so good. I really, really enjoyed this. I think it's gonna be hard to compare this to the other books in the category because this isn't my only 5-star in the category, but it is different in that it's more literary, and this is so different from We Solve Murders, which I also loved and gave a 5-star, but that is just, cozy and fun, and this is deep, and I feel like I've lived lifetimes with these people, and wow, really, really good. Now that you've seen my experience finishing the remaining 9 books in the list, we can look at all 20 of the books and see my ratings for all of them. So this is how the books ended up stack ranking for me. I tried to generally rank them from least favorite to most favorite, even when books had the same rating, to try to go from left to right. There are some books where it's a little bit contentious and a little bit difficult to do that, especially for my 5-star books because they are just so different and they just hit completely different interests for me. But generally, this is how I would rank them. Everything on the bottom row I would say is definitely worth reading if you're interested in them. The top row, there are some things that are questionable, but you know, you may enjoy them even though I didn't. Although I will say I do think The Teacher was just very objectively not good. But for the most part, I'm actually kind of pleased with how many books I did at least enjoy out of this list. I know a lot of times when we talk about the Goodreads Choice Awards, we think about how it's just a popularity contest and these are not the best mystery thrillers of the year or for any category. They're not the best, they're just the most popular. Out of this list, there were actually plenty of decent books that you're probably not going to have a bad time with. However, there are a lot of great other mystery thrillers that came out this year that did not make it on this list. If I had to pick my personal favorite on this list, I really don't know how I would choose between We Solve Murders and All the Colors of the Dark. I really just have to say both of those are my top favorite because they hit the two things that I really like in mystery thrillers. All the Colors of the Dark fulfills that well-written, thought-provoking, emotional side, and We Solve Murders fulfills that cozy, love the characters, just had a really good time with it side. So I would highly recommend both of those books, especially if you tend to really enjoy either of those subgenres. And soon we will see what actually wins in the Goodreads Choice Awards, and I'm going to be sitting over here crossing my fingers hoping that it is not The Teacher. So that puts a wrap on this video. If you've made it to the end, thank you so much for watching this. I think this is probably my longest video I've ever made, but it's also my most ambitious one that I feel like I've ever done. And I'm really so proud of myself for getting through the full list. It really feels like such an accomplishment. And it wasn't even that gruesome. You know, there weren't that many books I had to suffer through to get to this point. So it was a great time. Let me know down in the comments below if you've read any of these books, which ones are your favorites? Are there any that you haven't read yet that I convinced you to pick up? And let me know what you think is going to win the Goodreads Choice Awards, which we'll find out in just a couple days. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye.